Tonight's guest is Mark Hughes. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello, Vic. How's it going?
Well, it's going. How about yourself?
Yeah, all good, mate. Yeah, going good.
That's good. Beats alternative. Mark, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name's Mark Hughes. I'm 53 years old. I currently live in Australia. I'm actually just travelling around Australia, just me and my new puppy, which you'll probably hear in the background at some point. I'm originally from England. I'm from a place called One House, which is near Stowmarket in Suffolk. I grew up there, little village, grew up there. It's all surrounded basically by cornfields and forests. Not really any livestock or anything, so to speak, really. Went to the schools in Stowmarket. Grew up there till I was roughly around 19. I got a job, or my dad got me a job on the overhead power lines, which I'd done for roughly about 29 years. I've been doing it up to the age of about 39 when I got offered a job with a company called Western Power in Perth, Western Australia, which I then moved over to, and I've been here for 13 years now, and decided to, what with the cost of living and everything, I just decided, well, I got a really good price for my house, and I've always wanted to travel around Australia, so I thought, sell up, got the dog and everything, and now I'm currently in Queensland, about 6-7 hours north of Brisbane, overlooking a nice, lovely lake with mountains in the distance, and enjoying life, really, to be honest with you, Rick.
Well, if you can say that, that's all that matters. That's a really good thing. Mark, you've got a little helper there who's probably going to be a little bit on the noisy side as we try to record tonight's show. Please tell us about him.
Yeah, when I was traveling, it was about 4 months ago. I have a rescue Rottweiler. She's my best friend, called Precious. I called her Pudgy because all she ever thought about was food, and she's my best mate. And unfortunately, she was 7.5, and she had a problem with her liver. And unfortunately, it broke my heart. I had to have her put down while I was traveling. I was up a place called Cowley Beach, up about an hour and a half's drive south of Cairns. And I must admit, I vowed never to get another dog, but everyone I spoke to, so I gave Pudgy the best life possible. Even when I was working, I was walking her 3 times a day. She got all the best food, all the love and care that she ever wanted. And I never thought I'd get another dog again, but everyone I spoke to just said, look, you need to get one because, you got to give a dog a good home and everything. And sort of long story short, I thought, yeah, okay. So I actually drove down to Brisbane yesterday, and picked up I couldn't get another female Rottweiler because I'd be comparing her to Pudgy. So I brought a male Rottweiler. He's about 6 weeks old now. He's a great little fellow. I called him Ronnie the Rottweiler. But he's got loads of food, loads of water. He's had loads of exercise, loads of tickles now, but for some reason he's still whinging a little bit. So he might be getting a little bit vocal every now and again. So I do apologize for that. But he's a great little fella, but he's very, he's into everything basically. So, and when he gets a bit bored, he starts to whinge a little bit.
That's all right. Yeah, you've got your hands full there. 6 weeks old. That's young to be bringing him home.
Well, that's what I thought, Vic. But they said I got him from a qualified breeder, who obviously breeds Rottweilers. She's been doing it for a lot of years, and she basically, so I thought it was too young, but she said basically, as long as he's on solid food, then they're good to go, but not before 6 weeks. So he was basically 6 weeks old. He's on solid food. He's eating like a pig, to be fair. And she said, no, it's fine, because I actually asked her the same question. I did actually Google it, and it does say that to pick up a puppy should be 8 weeks unless he's on solid foods. And once he's on solid foods, then Google pretty much said the same thing. But, so I'm no expert. So yeah, so I picked him up yesterday, and, the typical Rottweiler, very stubborn, won't listen to a word I say. Basically just does what he wants. And, yeah, he's going to be great. But, at the moment, he's just a little bit, Rottweilers aren't barky, shouty sort of dog. Not very loud dogs, to be honest with you. People get the wrong impression of them. But they're usually quite quiet, but at the moment he's still sussing everything out, I think. obviously being away from his family, his mum and dad and his siblings is obviously a bit of a shock for him. But he does seem genuinely happy. He's not upset. He does seem happy. He's just, I don't know, I think he's just a bit too inquisitive, and he wants something to be happening all the time, I think is the thing. So.
Huh. Oh, I bet he does. And for the most part, he's going to be one causing the things to happen before you know it.
Yeah, without a doubt, mate.
You've got your hands full. There are a lot of similarities, Mark, between England and Australia, but there are also a lot of differences. Was there a lot of culture shock?
Not really. It's a different country. As long as you understand it's a different country, but it's obviously English-speaking country. The Australians, they're lovely people, very helpful, but you can't get anything done quick here. If you want something done to your car in England, you get it done that day. You want something done to your car in Australia, you're talking at least a week. Especially places like WA, Perth, they don't keep any spares for cars. Actually, you have to basically import them from Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane or somewhere like that. You can't get anything done quick here. That's the main thing. And the Australians are very laid back, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a good thing. In England, you're in a complete rat race. And over here, it's a lot more laid back, a lot more chilled out. And, it's good. It's a lovely place. And it's like what I'm doing now is like traveling around Australia. I think you can get the UK into Australia, I think 32 times. I think I Googled that a few years ago. So, and there's only a third of the population. So you can drive. I've driven sometimes for 8 hours and not even seen another car going through the top of Western Australia and things like that, so it's very, very remote, some of the places. You can't just get in your car and do what I do. You actually have to do a bit of homework into it, make sure I've got a Land Cruiser Trooper. I've got two fuel tanks on it, so I can get about 800 Ks out of both tanks. And obviously when I am going long distances, I obviously keep them filled up. Even if I stop, and I stop at a servo, they call them servos over here, but it's, petrol stations. Even if I only got to put $50 in, I will stop and put $50 in because you never know where the next one might be. And even if you do get to another place, there's no guarantee that they've even got any fuel. It's that remote, or they don't take cards. So you always keep cash on you as well and things like that, So it's definitely, doing what I'm doing is a lot different. And there is people, unfortunately, do die doing this because they go out unprepared, especially into the outback. I've been into the outback a long time, sorry. And generally, but people don't tend to take enough water and food with them because once you break down out there, there's no guarantee you're going to see anybody. And even if you do, there's no guarantee they're going to stop and help you either. So, you need to take plenty of food, water. I mean, my last power line job, I'm retired from the power lines now. I've done that for about 29 years. My last job was up in Derby, which is up in a place called Broome, which is the north of Western Australia. And there's an old lady sitting by the side of the road. And I was with this Sparky, this young girl called Ashley. She's a Sparky up there. And we stopped. And this old lady, she had lost her husband. She's in an old VW camper van. She was sold everything, was driving around Australia, just her, a dog and a budgie. And she sat on this is like the main road, this is the main road in the top of WA. And she sat there for 2.5 days with no car, wouldn't start, 45 degrees, no aircon, covered in flies, her, a dog and a budgie. And people just driven past her. Not many people, but some people had driven past us. One guy stopped. He said he'd get help and he never did. And luckily we passed. And, Ashley, who's from Derby, is a good friend with the lady who runs the tow truck place. So as soon as because once you get out of the little towns, you don't have any phone signal, like nothing at all. And, so we managed to, once we got back into phone signal, she found her friend who then got a tow truck out there to help this lady. But she was in her mid-60s, late 60s, and she'd sat on the side of the road for 2.5 days.
Wow.
So you have to be careful. I can't stress that enough. And also up in this neck of the woods, obviously you got your saltwater crocodiles. I've done stupid things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm amazed that other people aren't taken by them, if I'm honest, because you do get a lot of tourists will actually wade out to try and catch barramundi, which is like the main fish up here. I don't actually wade out into water. There's crocodile signs all over the place, but people just seems to ignore them for some bizarre reason. And, and people sort of stop and say, get out of the water. Haven't you seen the signs? Have you seen Crocodile Dundee? That's what's in these waters. Do you know what I mean? And things like this. And so I was quite surprised there's not more people actually killed by them, to be perfectly honest with you. So you got to understand that, unlike England, we're not at the top of the food chain up here, and they're obviously very optimistic. They will, if they can get you, you're just food to them. You're not a human. You're just something to eat. And if they're hungry, they will do their best to stalk you and get you. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they also you get a decent sized one, 15, 18 footer. They got a 4,500 PSI bite force. You're not going to be getting away from him anytime soon. So, and once they got you, that's it. You're gone. They can't send police divers in to try and find the body or anything. They'll just go and jam you under a rock, or like Mick Dundee said, that's exactly what they do. They'll jam you under a rock, leave you for 3 or 4 days, and come back later and eat you. And by that time, the search is off. So no body. And that's it. You're never seen again. And so you've got to understand that. And we've got 9 out of the 10 of the most deadliest snakes over here. As the other week I saw a western taipan. That's the second most poisonous land snake on the planet. When I was living in Perth, you've got the tiger snake. So I used to see one at least like 3 or 4 times a week. That's the 4th most poisonous land snake. But I'm not trying to put anyone off from coming to Australia. The spiders, don't worry about them. They're nowhere near as bad as people make out. But it just gets to a point. You just can't let it worry you. Do you know what I mean? Like if you love your surfing, just don't go out first thing in the morning and last thing at night, because that's when the sharks are hunting. And things. I'm not saying that you couldn't get taken during the day, but obviously there's always that threat because you're in their home. So it's not their fault if they decide to eat you. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's my view on it. But yeah, you just have to understand that, when you're walking your dog, don't walk through long grass if there's tiger snakes about and things like that, because they can sort of pretty much kill you in about 15, 20 minutes. But you just get used to seeing them, and you just don't let it worry you, Do you know what I mean, Vic? It's a completely different country, but, like England, it's an English speaking country. But I love it. I wouldn't ever move back to England. I love it here. And Queensland, if you ever get the chance to come up here, obviously you got the heat and the humidity, cause you're in the tropics, but the place is just so beautiful, and they're very friendly, very helpful people up here as well. They really are. They're lovely people. And, I'm just sitting here. I'm in a big 6-man tent looking out over a bunch of mountains, and it's like, I think it's about 32, 33 degrees here at the moment. I'm loving life. I've got my Starlink, my battery pack, my solar panels, my new AI laptop, and I'm running my part-time, my online business from here. And, got my little puppy, and, I'm just loving life. It's great. If anyone who gets the opportunity to do what I'm doing, definitely do it.
That's definitely a free way to live, but I don't know how you do it there, Mark. I mean, from what I hear, you've got sharks in the bathtub in Australia.
Yeah, it's a bit of a misconception, that one. When I first got to Australia, I was obviously concerned about, redback spiders and snakes everywhere. I was going to Perth, so I knew there wasn't crocodiles, but then you obviously think about sharks, great white sharks. They call them white pointers over here, but, same thing. And, but yeah, once you're over here for like a year, it's just like, don't worry about it. There's another snake called the dugite. I think that's the one. That's an Aboriginal word for walk the long way round, for obvious reasons. And I've had them strike at my car tires when I've actually been driving down the road and things like that. It's only happened 2 or 3 times, but they can be pretty aggressive as well. The tiger snakes can be very aggressive. They'll actually chase you. They're part of the cobra family. So you try to avoid them, but if you see one, you just don't go near it, and if you'll stand, like, which I have been up in, the north of WA, the crocodiles tend to start about Broome and go straight away across to sort of probably probably roughly where I am, a place called Gladstone. And there and above is basically where the crocodiles are. But when you're fishing for barramundi down the creeks and in the oceans and things like that, when you're fishing off the rivers, banks, now you just have to be very careful. If you can't see what's in front of you, you just don't go down there because you don't know what could be there. You just have to be sensible. It's not something to be scared of. You just have to have a bit of common sense. You know what I mean, Vic? But unfortunately, some people don't seem to possess that. Common sense isn't that common as they say sometimes.
No, it's not. And it's a beautiful place, but yeah, you have to be wary of your surroundings. Definitely, it sounds like. All right, Mark, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, basically, Vic, what brought me to this phone call and getting in touch with you was when I was in Australia, well, obviously still in Australia, but I was working for a company called Western Power, and the last 18 months I was with them, I was patrolling the power lines. Basically, in England, you walk the lines. Over here, you drive them because obviously it's a massive area to cover. So I had a four-wheel drive Navara, and I was off by myself because it's classed as observing, not working. So you don't actually need to have anyone with you. And you're basically four-wheel driving like 9 months of the year, which is great fun. Don't get me wrong. I loved every minute of it. And one day I was down south of Perth, probably about a 4.5 hour drive south of Perth, in a massive logging forest. And I had about 60, 70 towers. It was a 132,000 volt line. We call them a 132 line. And I was patrolling that, and you got a little tough book and you're updating, trying to find faults and things like that on the power lines. And I drove down this track following this line. It's really rough track. So you're lucky if you can do 5 kilometers an hour. Most of the time, you're not even going to do that. And I went down there for about 60 kilometers, and there was a road past the last tower, but unfortunately that was underwater. I'm still, even though there's a road there, I'm still probably 50 kilometers from the nearest person. So I thought, I checked the water. It's too deep. The forest down there in summer's full of tiger snakes, so I've been told. So I didn't really want to get out too much and whatever. And I certainly weren't going to go into the undergrowth. So I managed to turn the car around, and I just stopped. It was about 10:30 in the morning. It was a beautiful morning. So I turned the car around. I got out of the car. My left hand had hold of the windows were down, had hold of like the door where the windows go up and down. And all of a sudden, it was the weirdest thing. I was having a lovely day. It was a beautiful place. It's one of those days you're just glad to be alive. And then all of a sudden, every hair on my body just went up. And I don't know, I don't even know why. And I didn't even feel scared. I felt terrified. And I didn't see anything, and I didn't hear anything. And I just knew I had to leave. And I was actually thinking I'm going to go there's not going to be a human there. There's kangaroos there. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be a tiger snake. There's not going to be any people there. I mean, I'm in the middle of nowhere, And I couldn't let go of the door. My left hand just seemed to like seize up. And I looked down the tree line of the track, and there's a big tree, and I just knew whatever it was behind this tree. And this may sound insane, but all of a sudden the words Bigfoot just popped into my head. Now, I'd obviously heard about Bigfoot. I'd never looked into it. All I knew is they were big ape-like things from America. That's about my knowledge, really, to be fair. But I just knew I was going to die. I just knew whatever it was here, if I went into that tree line, I'm not coming back out again. So, and my left arm wouldn't let go of the door anyway. And then it was really weird. I jumped back in the car and I started driving. Obviously, I can only go maximum 5 kilometers an hour. And I didn't look to the left or right. I just kept me on because I didn't want to, wherever it might have been, I didn't want to upset it. So I just drove the best I could, as fast as I could, out of there. And I remember thinking that everything, the birds, the crickets, everything had just stopped. It like someone just turned the volume down. And I remember thinking, once I actually got out of there, there was a good 45 minutes, hour drive just to get back to the main track. And I just remember everything had stopped. And I remember they said in the Amazon, when the jaguars are about, everything stops. Obviously, that's the alpha predator down there, or the apex predator, or whatever. Anyway, I got back to the hotel and I just Googled Bigfoots in Australia, and it comes up with this yowie. Now, I'd never heard of a yowie, but there's allegedly cave drawings from the Aboriginals from thousands of years ago. And I thought, my God, it must have been that. But what it done was it brought back this thoughts and feelings of what happened to me when I was 16 years old. And I didn't speak about this for 36 years. And after I sort of looked into these yowies and things like that, and I started looking into Dogman, or I thought that was just called a werewolf. But basically what it was, Vic, was one night I was 16, I had my best friend Toby and my other friend Neil with us. And I come from this little place called One House, near 2 miles from a place called Stowmarket. And halfway between Stowmarket and One House, the streetlights stop. So you got basically, if you're we walked it a million times, you know. So you get to this place called Stow Lodge, which is an old workhouse. They've renovated it into flats and that now, I think. But once you hit there, you've then got basically a mile of no streetlights and a country road, basically. And me and my friend Neil was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and my friend Toby was sitting behind Neil. Toby's my best friend. He's 2 years older than me. And as we was driving, our friend Neil said, get down, because you got to understand something. I don't know what it's like in America, but in England, all we do is take the mickey out of each other when we grow up. You know, you go to work, you take the mickey all day, then you go home. You know, that's all the English tend to do. We're world-class mickey takers. I can't say the normal word that we'd usually use, but we'll say mickey takers, basically. So we got down. Once he said, hey, get back up again now. And he said, our friend Guy was walking just into the darkness, basically, from the streetlights. He's obviously walking home because he's from One House as well. So he said, we'll scare the hell out of him, which obviously we're all going to do. So we drove into One House, and just as you go past the sign, there's another friend of ours called Jonathan Rose. His house is on the right-hand side, and opposite him is the entrance to a field. So we parked our car in there, and we jumped over a fence, a gate, and then we turned left and then sprinted down this cornfield. If you can imagine it, we're sprinting on my friend Neil's next. You got the road, then you got a massive tree line, probably about 50 to 60 foot wide. And the trees are probably about 180 to 100 foot tall. And Neil was running next to the tree line, and there's combine harvester tracks in the cornfield. So there's Neil, then there's Toby, and then there's me. And me and Toby are running down combine harvester tracks. Neil's running down the tree line, and we get down to the corner. There's a corner. Neil hides behind a tree there. Me and Toby jump down about 6 foot down the embankment onto the road, run over the road, and then go and hide in the cornfield the other side. And we sit there waiting, and this is a true story. You know, I look up and it's a full moon, and it's one of those nights. There's not a cloud in the sky. There's no wind. You know, you could have heard a gnat fart from 100 yards away. It's an absolutely beautiful night. So we was sitting there waiting, like giggling like a bunch of schoolgirls, and then we suddenly hear a guy walking up the road. And then once he gets up like near us, like Toby and Neil don't start doing anything. You got to remember, I'm 16 years old. I know it sounds very childish, but I'm only 16, and we always, like I say, we're always trying to have a laugh with each other. And Toby and Neil don't do anything, so I start growling at him and start shaking the corn. I'm about probably 20 feet into the cornfield, 15, 20 feet into the cornfield, yeah. And funny enough, Guy turns around and growls back. I mean, if I was him, I'd have been terrified. I don't want to admit that. I'd have been absolutely terrified. Anyway, so I start growling louder. I start like on my hands and knees, start coming through the corn at him, you know, like an idiot, as you do when you're a child. And next thing he's off, you know, Usain Bolt wouldn't have caught him. And he's a short, chubby guy, you know, so he's off. So me and Toby are up, we're running, get onto the road, jump up the embankment. Neil's still behind this big tree, and we start running up the field. So I'm in one combine harvester track. Toby's in another one, and then Neil's running up the tree line again. And we're sprinting. And as we get like halfway up halfway up the field. I'm laughing my head. I think, oh my God, he must be terrified. I know I'd be absolutely terrified. Anyway, all of a sudden, at the end of my track, there's a hedge, only a small hedge, though, maybe 10 feet tall. And I noticed the silhouette of something standing there. And I'm sprinting towards it, and I've suddenly stopped laughing and whatever. And I'm just like, what on earth is that? That's what I couldn't even work out what it was. By this point, I'm probably about 50 feet from it. So I didn't notice it to start with, really. And it was facing the road where Guy was, basically. Now I'm sprinting. To my right is Toby, and then to the right of him is Neil. I'm probably 20 feet from Toby. Neil's probably 20 feet from Toby. And I'm sprinting towards this thing. And all of a sudden, I just get like this, the same thing that happened in the south of WA in this logging forest. All of a sudden, I don't feel scared. I feel terrified. And the same feelings just came rushing back. Well, that's the first time I felt it. You know what I mean? That happened again when I was down in the south of WA. And all I wanted to do was turn around and run in the opposite direction. That's all I wanted to do. But I just knew if I did, I'd be in that field by myself. And I didn't want that. And I looked to my right and I can see Toby's is in parallel with me, and Neil's in parallel with Toby. We're basically in a line, basically sprinting up this field. And then I look around, and this thing had then turned around, and now it was looking the opposite direction down to our local pub, which is called the Shepherd and Dog, and it's sort of down a bit of a hill. So it actually turned around. Now it's looking the opposite direction, and I'm sprinting at this thing. And I don't know what, I don't mind a minute. I don't know what to do. I'm just sprinting. I know I don't want to be by myself in the middle of this field. So I am just sprinting at this thing. I don't know what it is. If I'd actually been thinking clearly, I would have turned right, ran through the corner and got behind Toby, to be fair. At least I'd have got him first, you know what I mean? But, that didn't even enter my head, and I'm just sprinting at this thing, and I got within about, but I don't know what to do. I'm in a total state of confusion. This thing is standing there, it's looking at me, and I don't know what to do. I just keep sprinting at it. I just knew I didn't want to be by myself, and I got within about 20 foot of this thing, and it just took off down this hill, thank God. And I'll be honest with you, Vic, a greyhound wouldn't have caught up with this thing. This thing was off like I had a rocket up its backside. It was gone. And it didn't, as far as I can recall, it didn't make any sound. And basically what it was a 6 foot tall, on all fours, German Shepherd. It had the long ears. It was looking at me. I could only see like the side-on profile of it. I didn't know how wide it was or how muscular it was or anything like that. I just saw the side-on view of it. It was looking at me. It didn't have red glowing eyes or whatever. It didn't have 6 foot fangs dripping with blood or anything like that. It was just a 6 foot tall German Shepherd. Its front legs were longer than its back legs. So it came down, the back came down at an angle sort of like a hyena. I can remember because it was a very, very bright night. It was a full moon. The moon was basically above us, so we could see sort of pretty much everything. It had long, brown, matted sort of hair, but it was like scraggly looking hair, like I've been dragged through a hedge sort of thing. And I'm 5'11" and a half, so I'm just under 6 foot. And this thing could have looked me straight in the eyes, and as on all fours. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I think if it happened again, I would probably carry on sprinting at it because it's just one of those things. This terror, this adrenaline, I don't know what you want to call it. And I didn't know what to do. So it ran off. Thank God. I got to where it had been, and then we turned right to then run back to the car. Now as we're running back to the car, I'm thinking, no, it's my imagination. Don't be stupid. These things don't exist. So we got back into the car. And we drove round, because we was going to try and catch up with Guy and say, we got you sort of thing, But by this point, he's been running that quick. But, for a fat kid, he could run pretty quickly. He's already at home. So then my friend Neil said, I'm going to go home now. And Toby said, come round mine for a cup of tea. So I said, right, okay. So we went out for a cup of tea, and Toby's making the tea. We're sitting there, we're laughing, and I'm just thinking to myself, just forget about it. Don't think about it. Just forget about it. It's not what you think, you know. I know what I saw, but come on, it's a ridiculous idea. So we sat down, and me and Toby are sitting there talking. Now, Toby's a lovely person. He's been my best friend for so many years. We've sort of lost contact now, but we were friends, best friends for a long time, for decades. But he's one of those guys that doesn't lie about anything. If he does lie to you, a minute later he's apologising for it. He's just a real lovely, beautiful person. He's a real nice guy. And we're sitting there having a laugh, and then all of a sudden we're sitting opposite each other at the kitchen table, and he just says, he looked at me dead in the eyes. He says, "Are we going to talk about it then?" And as soon as he said that, I knew what he's on about, but I'm not going to give anything away. I don't know. I was still in a bit of a state of confusion, I think, Vic, to be honest with you. And he said, "I know you saw it." He says, "because you was running straight at it." He says, "And I saw it as well." He says, "Neil didn't see it because Neil was looking through the tree line at Guy." He says, "I know he never saw it." And trust me, Neil was a bit of a blabbermouth, lovely guy, but a bit of a blabbermouth. He would have definitely said something. And he said, "But I know you saw it." He says, "What was it?" And then I thought, well, I can't not say anything now. And I just looked, he's looking me square in the eyes, looking him square in the eye. I said, "I don't know, Toby." I said, "I think I know, but that's insane." And we sat there for the next sort of hour and a half, drinking cups of tea, and we went through every animal that we think it could have been. Now, we went from horses to cows to deer to foxes to field mouse. We went rabbits, you name it. We went through everything. Dogs, you name it, everything. There's no cows in our area. There's no horses in our area. There is deer in our area, but that's probably about 2 miles away near the dual carriageway. You'd probably call them a freeway, but they're all fenced in to stop poachers getting them. And it wasn't, we've seen hundreds of deer, it wasn't a deer. And we went through everything it could have been. And there is nothing. It looked like a German Shepherd, but it wasn't a German Shepherd. German Shepherds don't get that big. And we went through everything it could have been. And we'd watched the film, obviously, The American Werewolf in London. We all saw that because there's a girl called Julie who lived in our village. And there's a scene at the end when it's running around causing havoc in Piccadilly Circus, and a car hits the side of a double-decker bus, and a bloke shot out of the window and then gets his head run over by a car. Well, her stepdad was actually the stuntman who done that. So we obviously all saw it more because she sort of talked us into it, but we wanted to see it anyway because we were kids. We thought we enjoyed being scared, but we didn't, to be fair. We just were trying to be tough, but we weren't, And we saw the film The Howling. Obviously, that came out a few years later, I think. And it wasn't anything like The American Werewolf in London, this thing. And we just came to the conclusion it was the werewolf off the film The Howling. And that's exactly what it looked like. It looked like the werewolf off the film The Howling. And we both came to the same conclusion. It was nothing that we had seen. We'd never seen before. And that's what it was. And we both sat there. I said, "Well, shall I go and get my dad? You get your dad up. We'll get some torches and go and look for it or something." I said, "I don't know what to do." And he said, "Mark," he said, "no one is going to believe us." Which I knew, we're going back to 1987 here. No one is going to believe a word we're saying. So we decided not to. But Toby did say something a bit concerning, I would say is the word, is what would have happened to Guy if we hadn't have done that, because it was facing the direction where Guy would have been walking. Did you see what I mean? So it would have been going in his direction. They could have potentially met. So sometimes maybe God intervened here or something and sent us down to wind him up to save his life or something. Maybe I don't know. But then after that, I said, "Do you think we should get our dads up and go and try and find it and whatever?" But he just said, "Look, Mark, no one's going to believe us." And it's the truth. No one would believe us. So I never spoke about this 36 years until this thing happened to me in WA. And then I started looking into it. And then I just put werewolf site. I'd never even heard of a Dogman. I just assumed it was called a werewolf. And I just put in werewolf sightings UK, and it came up with your YouTube channel. So I clicked on there, and then I clicked on the actual page thing, and instead of trying to go through like the hundreds of testimonies you've got. I just put in UK sightings or something like that, and it came up with one. And there was a guy on, I think it was episode 400, and I listened to his, and has him and his brother and his best mate got chased out of a forest by a big black one and their best friend. And that was I think it was a year before me and Toby had our sighting. But the thing that sort of creeped me out the most was the fact that where they were, only 15, 20 miles from where we had our sighting. So it's very close proximity to where they had their sighting. And of course that really got me thinking, well, you know, maybe there's more around there. Maybe people just aren't talking about it. Maybe, I'm not too sure. But it seems a bit, I mean, they obviously saw a big black one where we saw a light brown in the sunlight. It sort of looked in the moonlight. It looked a bit gingery, to be fair, but it was definitely a sort of light brown color. That's what, you know, and matted hair and everything. So, yeah, so I listened to him and I thought, well, yeah, maybe I should phone you up or get in contact with you and just tell you my story, really. Because if they saw one there, there's a few gentlemen up in, I think, Yorkshire. I actually got in contact with one a few months later. But then I was actually moving house, so I sort of spoke to him, texted him a few times. He texted me back a bit, and I told him my story, and that's sort of the end of it, because I was too busy selling my house and everything like this. But yeah, so we're obviously not the only ones to have seen something in that area, basically. And that sort of prompted me to sort of get in contact. And once I heard that, I thought, well, I'll give you a bell or get in contact with you and see what you think. Now, I'll be honest with you, Vic, I don't believe people turn into wolves and howl at the moon and eat people. I really don't. But then again, I'm not saying it can't exist. You know, there's stranger things out there than what we know. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. And there was a really creepy thing that happened to me. I was up in Broome when I'm traveling. There's me and Pudgy and that, and I got to know a guy called Tony. He's 5 years older than me, so he's 58, and he travels around Australia. He's a chippy. He just does work. He finds a nice little place, lives on a campsite, finds work. Because you can do that over here. You see, in England, you can't really do that. In England, in Australia, it's such a big place, and up in these places, they can't really find the labour, you know. So people can do that. People do that for decades, you know. And he told me something, and I said, I'll tell you a story. And I told him the story I just told you. And he actually said, which I've never heard before. Now, I don't know if anyone else who listens to this, whether they can verify this, but in Australia, with the film The American Werewolf in London, where the two lads, well, one of them gets ripped apart and the other one gets scratched up and whatever, he actually reckons that's actually a true story. And they actually heard about that in Australia. And he said, yeah, that's actually true. And I said, you what? He said, that's actually a true story. I said, no, it's a film. He says, no. He said, didn't you hear about that? I'm like, no, never heard anything about it. We never heard anything about that in England anyway. Well, I never did. And he said, yeah, over here, there was actually a case of these two American lads who got torn apart by a werewolf in England. And I actually heard about it in Australia. But like I say, we never heard anything like that in England. So whether some of these people on your podcasts are saying that there's a government cover up, because he said that we certainly heard about it over here, that these two lads have been ripped apart by a werewolf. Like I say, I never heard that in England. So maybe there is a cover up. I'm not too sure. But yeah, so that's pretty much my story there, Vic. And it is, like I say, I don't believe in werewolves, but I'm not saying that they don't exist. You know, people believe that you couldn't run the 4-minute mile till someone done it. Do you know what I mean? So who's to say that there isn't werewolves out there, or dogmen as you call them? You know, I remember there's an insect I saw on something. They done the scientific experiment where they put all these insects that can't fly onto a plant, and then they didn't feed the plant at all. And within about 2 weeks, all these insects had actually changed their biology, grown wings, and flew to the plant that was still alive. So, I mean, if an insect can do that, then I don't see there's any reason biologically why a human can't do it. It's just we don't understand it. So I'm not saying that there is and there isn't, but yeah, it was, besides that time in the forest, it was the most terrifying thing in my life. I didn't know what to do. I would, honestly, people say, I want you to run over to Toby and things like that. I didn't even enter my head. did not even enter my head. But one thing I should have done on hindsight, or me and Toby should have done, was the next day we should have gone down and looked for tracks. But that didn't even enter our head. I think that's what we should have done, to be honest with you. But we didn't even think, because we just decided we're not going to tell anybody. And we never did. We kept a secret. And like I say, till this thing happened to me, that's the only time. Then after that, I was in my, this was probably, so I got there 40, so I was probably about 46 by this point. So you get to a stage in life where you don't really care what people think of you anyway. And I'll explain and say, yeah, this is what we saw. It wasn't just me, my best friend saw it. If you don't believe me, that's up to you, but this is what we saw. So I don't mind talking about it anymore, but I didn't speak about it for 36 years. And yeah, once I heard what this other gentleman said, from Ipswich, that sort of, I thought, well, maybe it's time to actually come forward and just say, look, this is what we saw, and, maybe it might save someone's life or something. I don't know. But I genuinely believe, my Pudgy, she was 60 kilograms. She's a big girl. Sometimes if she's trying to chase, I'd never let her off the lead. She's a rescue dog, so I couldn't let her off the lead. She didn't like other. She's great with people, great with kids and that, but she just didn't like other animals. And sometimes she'd be trying to chase a kangaroo or a wallaby or things like that. And I'm between 90 and 93 kilos. I'm pretty strong for my size. I've done physical work my whole life. And sometimes that'd take every ounce of strength for me just to hold her back. She's that powerful, and she's a very muscular, God bless her. She's a very muscular dog and everything. So if you think you've got an animal out there probably at least 4 to 6 times her size, I think it ran off because it felt outnumbered. I don't know if it had claws, like it had hands and claws, what some people say. I don't know if it had anything like that, but I think it could have quite easily killed the 3 of us. That's my opinion. If it had wanted to, and if I'd been in there by myself, then no, I wouldn't have stood a chance. I'd probably stand more of a chance for an 18-foot salty than this thing. Do you know what I mean? It was, and like some people say, they see them where they're standing like 8, 9, 10 foot tall. If this thing was standing on its back legs, then yeah, I would say it's probably 9 foot. It would have been around that mark, I would think. Like I say, I never saw its hands. I don't know if it had claws or whatever. Well, I've never seen an animal move that fast. Like I say, a greyhound wouldn't have kept up with it. Once that went. That was gone in seconds, And that was another reason why I wasn't really going to say anything. You're like, well, I must have imagined it. But it wasn't until Toby said that he saw it, that I thought, well, that wasn't my imagination. That was actually a real thing. 'Cause you do obviously start second guessing yourself and start questioning yourself when you see something that you don't think exists. But yeah, and that's really the story of what we saw, Vic. Yeah, that's about it really, mate.
Wow, that's a lot to put on the shoulders of a 16-year-old, or anyone at any age for that matter. And I'm not sure if you knew it or not, but there actually are Dogman reports of eyewitnesses seeing them on the moors in England. Did you know that?
I didn't know that until I started looking into it. Like I said, I didn't even know what a Dogman was. And I remember there's a guy, I can't think of his name now, not the guy I sort of got in contact with, but another one. And he saw one, he said it looked like the one out of the American Werewolf in London. He lives up in Yorkshire. I think it's on the main road one of the main roads between like Huddersfield and Doncaster or somewhere. And he saw one up there on the moors. And I've worked up there before, on the power lines. So it's all moors up there. I definitely believe in the beast of Bodmin because they're just black panthers that were let loose in the 1960s or 50s, I think. So I know they're definitely about. There's definitely black panthers, especially this is down in Devon and Cornwall. And I would imagine there's things like that up there. But after what he saw, there's no way that's a black panther. You're talking about something huge, and, like the one we saw wasn't anything like that. Like he saw one like the American Werewolf in London where we saw one that was just like the one out of the Howling, So if I just don't see why anyone would lie about this. We're not trying to get any money out of it. We're not trying to, most people don't even want to give their name. So it's not like people actually try to become famous or whatever. So they must be seeing something, so, yeah. So that's when I really started looking into it. And that's when I sort of really started deciding, maybe I should sort of get in contact with someone, which turned out to be you, and tell you my story. And, just to let people know that, they're not just in Yorkshire, they're in East Anglia and that as well, probably in Norfolk and places like that as well. It's just you don't obviously get to see them very often. So, yeah, that's sort of really about it on that bit, Vic.
Yeah, you're right. These things are all over. They definitely are. And it's hard to play the glad game when it comes to a Dogman encounter, but we can still play it when it comes to yours. Like you just alluded to, thank goodness the one that you saw, you basically came face to face with it. Thank goodness that one didn't look like the one from An American Werewolf in London. Thank goodness it looked the way it did instead.
If that looked like the American Werewolf in London, I honestly don't know what I would have done. I'll be honest with you. If that looked like that thing out of that film, I think I would have turned around and ran in the opposite direction. I honestly do. I don't think, because it looked like a German Shepherd, I could identify it with that. Do you know what I mean? But if it looked like something like what this gentleman said he saw, which he obviously did, then I don't know what I would have done. And I think Toby would have done the same. I think we'd have just turned around and just sprinted and just hoped for the best. I really do. I don't think we wouldn't. I wouldn't. There's no way I would have carried on running at it. Let me put it that way. No way in a million years. Because that thing off the American Werewolf in London is blooming terrifying. But I do know one thing. If you Google images of the werewolf off the film The Howling, there's a picture of the guy and the lady, I think, who actually made that werewolf. And there's a picture of them standing next to it. But they're standing on two legs. Whereas the one we saw was on all fours. If that thing was if the one we saw was standing on two legs, that's identical to what we saw. Long, scraggly hair, looked like a German Shepherd. That is what we saw, basically, except it wasn't standing on two legs. But that is what we saw. And, that's definitely what we saw. Like I say, I'm not saying I believe in werewolves and that, but I'm not saying that they're not real either. But that is the thing that we saw.
Mark, it sure does make you wonder when you consider the fact that so many eyewitnesses have reported that the Dogman they saw looked like the Dogman over here from An American Werewolf in London, from every werewolf movie, basically. So it makes you wonder, maybe there is something to this idea that producers, that Hollywood knows something that we wouldn't have thought they knew.
Well, that's the thing, Vic. Well, after this gentleman, Tony, in Broome, told me that they say that he said that was actually a real thing that happened to them two American guys. That makes you wonder, like, where do they get the idea at that time to come out with a werewolf film that looked exactly like that? Do you know what I mean? So, it makes you wonder, really, because allegedly, like I said, I don't know anything about this story, but this gentleman, Tony, did. He told me all about it. So it makes you wonder why all of a sudden they came out with this American Werewolf in London film when two American backpackers had been ripped apart on the moors in Yorkshire. And we never heard about it either. I didn't hear anything about it in England. So it does make you wonder where they come up with these ideas. Why all of a sudden, if Tony's correct, that happened, and then a few years later, the American Werewolf in London comes out. It's basically, it didn't run around London, and whatever, but what the original plot is of them two hikers, them two backpackers getting torn apart, it comes up with that. It seems a bit coincidental, really, when you think about it. So I think if there is such a thing, then I would think that other people in the government would probably know about this sort of thing. If that got out, that there is these things, then, you're not going to be leaving your house after dark, are you? If you're living in these places, let's be honest, but like I say, if what we saw was like the American Werewolf in London, then there is no way I'd have been running at it. I would have taken my chance of turning around and running. And I know for a fact Toby would have as well. He wouldn't have ran at it. Or he wasn't running. He was 20 foot to my right. I was running straight at it. So I'm pretty sure he'd have turned around and ran as well. But I think it's because we could actually look at it and say, yeah, it looks like a German Shepherd, but a massive one. That's why I kept running at it, but yeah, it was horrendous when it happened. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Whether I'll get to the bottom of it or not, I don't know. But that's what we saw, Vic. You know, I'm not going to sit here and lie about it. You know, people could laugh at me, people can take the mickey or do whatever. I don't really care. But you know, that's what we saw. You know, so yeah.
You're right. That's what you saw, and that's all there is to it. And thank goodness that it didn't play out so that you did turn around and bolt the opposite direction. If you would have done that, I could understand it, but yeah, thank goodness that didn't happen. That's not how it played out. You said it looked like a 6-foot-tall German Shepherd as it was standing there. If it was that tall on all fours, though, how long would you say it was?
Oh, you're probably talking... Cool. I reckon lengthwise, at least 7 or 8 feet long. I never noticed a tail though. I can never recall seeing a tail. But I'm saying 7 or 8 feet long, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I never got a frontal view of it, so I couldn't see how like broad it was, how muscular it was. I never saw anything like that. I only saw when it was looking at the road, I saw it side on, and when it turned around, I saw it side on. But then I'm not really sort of looking for muscles and claws and things like that because I just don't know what to do. You know, it's not the sort of thing you're sort of really thinking about at the time. So, but yeah, I would say it's probably at least 7 to 8 foot long. I would think, but its front legs were a lot longer than its back legs, though. So it's more, you know, his shoulders were a lot taller than this bum. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a normal feature for these things. You talked about this whole government side of Dogman encounters. I've spoken with eyewitnesses from every continent except for Antarctica, and it seems to me like the U.S. government is definitely paranoid when it comes to these things, but if you think the U.S. government's paranoid, it seems to me like the government over in England is especially paranoid about this getting out of the bag. So it doesn't surprise me that you hear of fewer and fewer encounters with these things getting out over there than they do over here. It seems like they're really stringent on squashing all that.
Well, I mean, if they can hear about this thing in Australia and we never heard about it in England, then they must be. Like I said, I was really shocked when he told me this, when Tony said, you know what I mean? I was really shocked before. Well, that can't be right, surely. But they must have kept that right under wraps. They really must have done. Like I say, no one, as far as I'm aware, because trust me, we would have talked about it. Me and Toby wouldn't have said what we saw, I don't think. We sort of just said there's no point saying anything to anyone, which is what we've done. Me and Toby never spoke about it again. But I mean, if we'd have actually heard that 2 hikers had been, you know, ripped apart by a werewolf, you know, we definitely would have come forward then. Because we'd have come forward and said, well, this is what we saw. Do you know what I mean? We didn't see the American Werewolf in London, but we saw the film of the werewolf off the film, The Howling. You know, we would definitely have come forward. So the government or whatever, if what Tony's saying is true, we would definitely have come forward. We would have had to, you know, we'd had too much. That had been on our conscience too much. Not wanting anyone else to get killed, even if people were going to take the mickey out of us and everything like that. Then yeah, we would have definitely come forward, but we never heard anything, but they heard about it in Australia. So I think that must be a bit of a government cover up there, I would think, if what Tony's saying is correct, there's no reason for him to lie. Do you know what I mean? He's not going to lie about it because what would be the point, you know? You know, he's got no reason to lie. So, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. If it's true, it would not surprise me in the slightest. You can't trust the governments for anything anyway, Vic. Let's be honest with you. All they want is your money and to own and control everything. So, you know, why not that as well?
Oh, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure they did sweep it under the rug. And thank goodness that you didn't run afoul of them because of coming out with what happened to you. So that's another way we can play the glad game. Considering the fact your encounter happened 36 years ago, Mark, have you come to terms with it by now, or are you still compromised by it?
To be honest with you, Vic, once me and Toby decided not to talk about it, it didn't bother me. It really didn't. Maybe I was it compartmentalized, or whatever you call it, I can't think of the word now, and put it to the back of my mind. And I never really thought about it again. And to be honest with you, because the Shetland dog is right where we saw it, we saw it on one side of the hedge. On the other side of the hedge is a little muddy path going down to the Shetland dog pub. And I walked down there 100 times by myself at night, and not once did I ever think about it. And I didn't start walking down there probably till 3 or 4 years later, to be fair. But I sort of pretty much blotted it out of my mind, really, until this thing happened in WA, in Western Australia. So I basically forgot about it. But then again, you got to understand something, Vic, as well. I've listened to quite a few of your episodes where, some of these poor people, they're getting chased by one and they get their dog ripped apart in front of them and, things like that. So, I mean, we didn't have that traumatic experience. It didn't kill one of us. It didn't kill one of our dogs we didn't actually have dogs, but, do you know what I mean? So some of these people that you have on here obviously have massive traumatic experiences with these things, which we didn't. So I think that was quite easy for us to just forget about it. But I mean, if we'd have seen that sort of tearing, a dog apart, so I had a dog, like Pudgy back in them days or something, and that ripped her apart in front of me, I'm not going to leave the house at night ever again, to be honest with you, So it never really affected me that way because all I done was saw it and watch it run off and just didn't know what it was. Do you know what I mean? So, but nothing really traumatic. It was traumatic, obviously, because I didn't know what it was. But it wasn't like a traumatic experience where I saw it hurt someone or something like that, where obviously with some of the people that you have on your show, I mean, that must be absolutely horrendous, some of the things they must go through. And to be honest with you, if I was in their position, I probably wouldn't leave the house again, and I'd be paranoid about it. If I saw something like that, and then me and Toby, to be fair, if we did have a dog, for instance, and it did do that, I think no one would have shut us up. We would have said, look, this is what we saw. This is what it's done. Get hold of the police. What are you going to do about it? We got to find it, So we would have definitely become very vocal then. But all we did is saw it, Vic. So it didn't really affect us that way. So we could forget about it if that makes any sense, Like I say, until this thing happened in the forest over here, it's only once that happened that brought back all them old thoughts and feelings. I hadn't really thought about it, and I told a few people and things like that. I mean, they sort of pacify you, but they're thinking, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? So, which, to be fair, if I was in their position, I'd think the same. That's probably what I would be thinking as well, to be honest with you. But that's what we saw, Vic, but like I say, it wasn't a massively over traumatic experience. But like I say, some of these people that you have on here, is trying to break into your house, it's tore your dog apart, it's chasing you down the road when you're doing 70 miles an hour in a car. We didn't have that experience, but for these poor people that did have them experiences, I don't know what I'd have done. I would definitely be thinking about it a lot differently, let me put it that way, to the way I do now, or I have done since it happened, So, I think it was quite easy for me and Toby to forget, in my opinion, but that's basically what we done. Yeah. And like I say, until that thing happened down in the logging forest, that's when it really sort of came back and thought, well, maybe I should just look into it. Obviously, we didn't have the internet back in them days. And then I ended up obviously finding your thing and started listening to them. And I thought these two brothers saw one 15, 20 miles from us. And that was during the day. I mean, this was on a full moon. It was a very bright night as well. There's no clouds in the sky, weren't a breath of wind. It was a really beautiful night. And, it was, yeah.
It's good you realize that your encounter was definitely on the benign side when it comes to Dogman encounters, and thank goodness it was, because as you realize, it definitely gets a lot worse than that. It really does.
Oh, some of these people I've heard on your podcast, I'm like, my God, how do these people even carry on living there? To be honest with you, I mean, I had no choice. I was 16, lived with my mum and dad, but some of these people, they're braver than me on your podcast. I mean, some of these experience they've had and they carry on living in the same place, knowing there's something out there, and they've done it to their dog. Who's going to be next? Them? Do you know what I mean? Because if it can do that to a decent sized dog, it can quite easily do it to a human. I mean, I honestly think that, I mean, if you, like I said before, I mean, I've got Pudgy there. You're talking about something maybe 4, 5, 6 times the size of her. Yeah, that could have killed the three of us easy. We wouldn't have stood a chance. We wouldn't have stood a chance against something like that. The three of us against that, no, not a chance. It had a massive head on it, big ears. We wouldn't. But fortunately, I think it must have felt that it was outnumbered and decided to run for it. So. But some of these other people on your podcasts, I don't know how they continue living where they do. I really don't. And I take my hat off to them, and that's the truth. They're better men and women than I am. I certainly wouldn't be staying there again. I'd be moving as quick as I could anyway.
Oh, sure. And understandably so. Make no mistake about it, that Dogman knew full well that it could have just taken all three of you out without a second thought. It didn't run because it was frightened. It knew full well it could have dispatched all of you without a thought. But why it ran, I don't know. Maybe just to get out of your sight. Who knows for sure why it did that, but trust me when I tell you, like I said, it knew full well that you didn't pose any threat to it, and that's a fact. But having said that, Mark, it's about time for us to get out of here, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
There's things out there that we don't know about. We think we're this clever race of people and things like that, but we're not really. Let's be honest. I mean, we can't even build the pyramids. Do you know what I mean? With all our so-called technology, there's things out there. I mean, I've got a friend of mine, a guy I used to work with on Western Power called Neville. He's retired now. He's from Western Australia. He's only ever left Western Australia once, and you do get a lot of that over here in Australia. I've met people who've never left, they're in their 60s and 70s, never left Queensland, and Northern Territory and WA and places like this. So you do get a lot of people like that. And him and his best friend, he grew up in Perth, and basically, besides going on holiday once abroad, he's never left the state. I think it was one until he's in his 50s, he actually got a passport, But him and his mate, his mate had a tinny. We call them tinnies. They're like a little tin boat. They call them tinnies over here. And it's like a 15 foot tinny, I think, something, or 12 foot tinny, something like that. And they went fishing just off Perth. There's an island called Rottnest, really beautiful island. A lot of tourists go there and that. And they were about 20 miles past that on a really nice calm day fishing. And Neville was a lovely old boy. He's a real nice person. And I never said anything about this. I never talked to it. This is before anything happened before. I'd totally sort of forgotten about it. And even though I did remember it, I certainly wouldn't be talking about it. So this was long before this thing happened down south of WA and all this lot. And he said to me one day, he said, Neville and his mate were out on their fishing boat, on his mate's fishing boat, and they saw a fin of a shark. And he said this fin was about 8 foot out of the water. And he said you could see the tail. He says it was the same fish. You could see it was the same fish. And he said it's probably about 15 meters apart between the fin and the tail. So you're talking 50, well, was it, probably about 55 feet apart. And he says, I'll go, and he says, I sort of looked at him, laughed. I said, you sure, Neville? I said, come on, mate. And he says, no, he says, and he said the same thing basically as me, really. Well, he said the same sort of thing as what I think, really. I don't care whether you believe me or not. That's what we saw, He said, seriously, he said, I'll go to my dying day, to my last breath, saying, this is what me and Jim, or whoever his name is, that's what we saw. He said, and that was a megalodon. He said, there's nothing else it could have been. He said, there is nothing else in the ocean that we know of that's that big, or that's existed that big, So I'm sitting there thinking, well, that must be 55 foot between the tail and the dorsal fin. So you probably got around, if it's that big, probably another 30 foot on top of that to the tip of the nose sort of thing, or 20, 30 foot. So you're talking, 70, 80 foot shark here. And he said, yeah, I know. And I'm like, what did you do? He said, what do you think we done? He said, he just looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, what do you think we done? He says, we pulled our rods in and just went straight back into Fremantle, which is where they sort of put the boat in the water. And then 2 weeks later, his mate, Jim, or whatever his name is, I can't remember his name, I'm just saying Jim as an example. He had a boat pretty much all his life. And 2 weeks later, he actually sold his boat and never went on the water again. And to this day, I don't think he ever has. So there's definitely things out there that we don't know about. And and it's the same thing with him. Why would he lie? He says, I don't even care whether you believe me or not. He says, but that's what we saw. And that's the thing, Vic. Why would these people lie? I mean, once this thing happened down in, this logging forest, I looked into Bigfoot and things like this. And then I started looking into Dogman, which I just thought it was a werewolf. I didn't even know there was that terminology. And, I think they said you got like 500 confirmed sightings of Bigfoot up in the Pacific Northwest every year. And you can put that down to misidentifications, people having a laugh, things like that. But they can't all be lying. That's the thing. Some of them probably are, but they can't all be lying. And it's the same with all the people on your podcast. There might be a few who might have been a bit confused, but there's which, to be honest with you, all the ones I've heard sound 100% convincing. And I don't think personally, all the ones I've heard, I don't think any of them are lying. I really don't. And that just sort of concretes it even more that what we actually saw, that we weren't actually even imagining it, So if Megalodon still exists, Neville, I'm telling you now, he might not believe in Dogmen, but he would sit here and tell you exactly what he saw. And that was a Megalodon. And who am I to say that he didn't? You know what I mean? I wasn't there. And why would he even say it to start with? He's not trying to become famous. He's not trying to make money out of it. If anything, it makes him look stupid in front of, because the Aussies are a bit like the English. We love to take the mickey out of each other. He's setting himself up to have the mickey taken out of him, So why would he even say that to start with? So, like I say, some people get a rise, I suppose, out of making up lies and, what they do, like hoax Bigfoots and things like that, but they're just idiots. Which is a shame, really, because I do believe in Bigfoots. I believe in Yowies, which is the Australian Bigfoot. I do believe in them, to be fair. I do believe in ghosts, because I actually lived in a haunted house once. So the ghosts definitely exist. I know that for a fact, because me and my girlfriend and her 2 kids used to see one every day, probably 20, 30 times a day, to see his big 7-foot shadow. We found out years later that actually hung 6 people in the back garden, because it was built in the 1600s, and they actually hung 6 people in the back garden. And back in them days, they used to have the highwaymen. They were like the bank robbers back in them, because the banks used to transfer money in horse and carts. And these highwaymen used to rob the horse and carts. And they actually hung 6 highwaymen in this back garden of this house that we were renting at the time. And I lived there for a year because there was nowhere else to rent. I mean, even the dogs used to go berserk for no reason. And we all used to see this bloody thing. Oh, sorry, this thing. And, so ghosts definitely exists. Neville would swear on Megalodons exist. I swear that what we saw was the werewolf off the film, The Howling. But yeah, there's things that we think we're intelligent. We think we're this like super race, but I don't think we know hardly anything about the real world, if we're honest with you, if I'm honest. I think there's things out there that we wouldn't even dream are out there, This is the thing, Vic. I mean, when my last powerline job, I was up in Derby, which, like I say, it's the north of WA, and that used to take me 2 days to drive to work. I would drive from Derby through to a place called Halls Creek. And then I stayed there the night in a hotel. I was in an old bucket truck, cherry picker bucket truck, what we use on the power lines. And then the next day I'd then drive about 8 hours south through the desert, or through the bushland and the scrubland and the desert, basically. It's the Tanami Desert, to a place called Balgo, which is a Aboriginal community. And I was running all the low voltage jobs out there. And you can drive, and when I say it's a road, it's basically a corrugated dirt track, which is a dirt track. I don't know if you get them in America. They're basically tracks that are got corrugations on. The wind causes them, and it basically rattles your car and your truck and everything to absolute pieces. But I've driven down there for 8 hours and not seen another person, not like nobody. And I remember a few times thinking, you start thinking crazy things, obviously. But I remember thinking one day the truck's just going like this the whole way down this blooming road. It drives you mad after a while. And I remember thinking, if a T-Rex ran out in front of me now don't get me wrong, I think T-Rexes are extinct. But if one ran out in front of me now, I wouldn't be surprised because there is nobody here. There is nobody. And I've been driving for like 4 or 5 hours and haven't seen a soul. And the only way anyone would even know that there's something there is if they picked it up on Google Earth. Because there is, in Australia, there's so many, I think it's 85% of the population, so 85% of 26 million live within a 50-kilometre drive of the ocean. So 15% of 26 million people live inland further than that. So in reality, the majority of Australia, there is nobody there. So they can't tell me that there's things out there that we don't know about. There's got to be things out there that we wouldn't have no idea are there because there's nobody there to see them. And like I say, unless you pick it up on Google Earth, you would not even know it's there. You see what I mean? So there could be anything out there. I believe that. And if people turn into these things, I'm not going to be the first person to say no, they don't, because just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean to say that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that it does, but if someone told me that, I'm certainly not going to take the mickey and say, no, you're full of it. You know what I mean? Because why would these people say these things to start with? That's my opinion,
Oh, sure. I don't believe that people turn into werewolves. I do believe the Dogmen look the way they do 24/7, 365. I'm not going to say in this wild, crazy world it's impossible for there to be such things as werewolves, but I do believe that it's much more likely that dogmen just are dogmen all the time, and that's all there is to it. But having said that, Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime, Vic. I'm glad. Hopefully, it might get a bit more information out there from where I grew up and where these other gentlemen grew up, that maybe someone, can hear these and maybe, hopefully save a life. Maybe, I don't know how, but just getting the awareness out there is a good thing, I think.
Oh, it is. It definitely is. Well, thanks again so much for your time and have a great night.